The phone rang at 6:47 a.m. I almost didn't answer it. Unknown number, too early, probably a scam. But something made me pick up. Is this Daniel Reyes? Speaking. This is Dr. Whitfield from St. Marcus Transplant Center. I'm calling about your kidney donor match. We've been trying to reach your parents for 3 weeks about scheduling, but the number on file has been disconnected. Are you aware the surgery window closes in 11 days? I sat up in bed so fast I got dizzy. What surgery? I said. I don't have a surgery. There was a pause on the line. The kind of pause that tells you the person on the other end already knows they've said something they shouldn't have. Mr. Reyes, your parents signed the intake forms for you 8 months ago. You were matched with a living donor for a kidney transplant. According to our records, the procedure was fully funded, fully scheduled, and then, 3 weeks ago, your parents called and canceled it, permanently, and withdrew the deposit. I want you to sit with that for a second, because it took me a full minute to understand what I was hearing. I don't need a kidney. I've never needed a kidney. Which meant one of two things. Either the hospital had the wrong Daniel Reyes, or my parents had used my name, my identity, and a matched donor's kidney for something else entirely. By the end of this story, you're going to understand exactly what something else meant. And I promise you, you have never heard a betrayal like this one. Stick around. Because the ending is not what you think. My name is Daniel. I'm 29 years old. I work as a mechanical drafter in Ohio, and up until 11 days before this story really begins, I thought my family was just normal. Not perfect. Normal. I'm the middle child. My older brother Marcus moved to Seattle for work and mostly stays out of family drama. Smart man. My younger sister Priya is 24, and she's always been the golden child. Not in a cruel, obvious way. Just in that quiet way where every accomplishment of hers got a dinner, and every accomplishment of mine got a nod. I made peace with that a long time ago. Some families have a favorite. I told myself it didn't matter, because I had a good relationship with my parents otherwise. My dad, Ravi, ran a small logistics company. My mom, Anjali, worked part-time at a pharmacy and handled most of the family's finances, including, it turned out, mine. Here's the detail that matters. 2 years ago, my kidneys started failing. Slowly, quietly. The kind of failure you don't notice until a routine blood work panel flags something, and suddenly you're seeing a nephrologist every 6 weeks. Stage 3 chronic kidney disease. Not an emergency. Not yet. But heading there. My parents were the ones who insisted on handling the medical paperwork. You're busy with work, my mom said. Let us deal with the hospital stuff. That's what parents are for. I believed her. Why wouldn't I? She'd been managing family logistics my whole life. Insurance, taxes, my grandmother's medical bills when she was alive. It made sense that she'd handle mine too. So when the hospital found a living donor match 9 months ago, a rare, near-perfect match, the kind of match transplant coordinators describe as once in a career, my mother was the one who took the call. She told me, and I quote, "The doctor said your numbers are stable for now. They want to keep monitoring you before doing anything invasive." That was the lie that started everything. There was no monitoring. There was a scheduled surgery, a funded, matched, ready-to-go transplant that could have added decades to my life, and she made it disappear. Now here's where I need to back up, because you need the second half of this story to understand why. Priya got engaged in March. Her fiancé, Arjun, comes from a well-off family, the kind of family where weddings aren't really weddings. They're 3-day productions with a guest list of 400 people. And in the specific cultural context my family comes from, there's an expectation, quiet but real, that the bride's family contributes significantly, not officially called a dowry anymore. Everyone dances around the word. But everyone in the room knows exactly what it is. Arjun's family had, according to what I later pieced together, made it known, again, quietly, through aunties and group chats and the kind of passive-aggressive family diplomacy that runs entire cultures, that a certain contribution would reflect well on our family's standing. A specific number. A number my parents did not have. My dad's logistics company had a rough 2 years. A warehouse contract fell through. A truck fleet needed replacing, and quietly, behind the scenes, my parents were bleeding money. I didn't know any of this. Nobody told me. Why would they? I was the son who didn't need to worry about that stuff, so they needed money. A specific, large amount on a specific timeline. Before the wedding date, Arjun's family had already announced to 400 people. And somewhere in that financial panic, my mother remembered something. My transplant was fully funded, pre-approved by insurance, with the hospital's transplant fund covering the majority of ancillary costs, since I qualified for a state assistance program tied to my income bracket. There was a non-refundable deposit tied to my case, held by the hospital's transplant coordination office, meant to secure the surgical team and facility slot. If the surgery got canceled, that deposit, nearly $30,000, would be released back to the account it came from. My mother's account. Money my parents had put in months earlier as part of the co-pay structure, thinking they'd never see it again once the surgery happened. Do you see it yet? They didn't just cancel my transplant. They canceled my transplant because canceling it released $30,000 back into their hands. Money they then used, dollar for dollar, according to a bank transfer I later saw with my own eyes, as a deposit on the wedding venue and a gift to Arjun's family 3 weeks before the hospital called me. They didn't choose between my kidney and my sister's wedding by accident. They chose. And here's the part that still keeps me up some nights. This wasn't a split-second panic decision made in a moment of desperation. Canceling a scheduled transplant isn't like canceling a hotel reservation. It requires forms, phone calls, a written explanation to a hospital ethics liaison about why a patient is choosing, voluntarily on record, to defer a life-extending surgery. My mother sat on the phone with a hospital administrator and constructed a story. She said I'd expressed anxiety about the procedure and wanted more time to consider it. She used my own hypothetical fear, one I never actually had, as the excuse to take away a decision that was never hers to make. Think about the layers of that lie for a second. She didn't just take the money. She built a version of me, anxious, hesitant, unsure, that didn't exist, specifically so the hospital wouldn't ask more questions. She weaponized a version of her own son to make the theft look reasonable on paper. I didn't know any of this yet, sitting in my apartment at 6:52 a.m. with the phone still warm in my hand. All I knew was that something didn't add up, and that feeling, that cold, sinking, something is wrong feeling, was about to get a lot worse before it got better. Let's go back to that morning. Dr. Whitfield stayed on the line while I tried to process what she was telling me. She read me the cancellation date. She read me the reason listed in the system, and I want you to hear this exactly as she said it, because it's burned into my memory. The cancellation reason, typed by an administrator based on a phone call with my mother, read, "Family has decided to allocate resources elsewhere at this time. Patient's condition considered stable for deferral. Allocate resources elsewhere. My kidney, my literal internal organ, my future. Filed under resources." I asked Dr. Whitfield the question that mattered most. Is the donor match still available? She hesitated again. The donor was informed of the cancellation. Living donor matches like this they don't stay open indefinitely. I won't lie to you, Daniel. There's a chance. But it's not guaranteed, and every week that passes makes it less likely. 11 days. I had 11 days to fix something my own mother broke on purpose, and she'd been lying to my face about it for 3 weeks while planning my sister's engagement party. I hung up the phone and just sat there, not crying. Not yet. I was doing math. Because here's the thing about betrayal this specific. Your brain doesn't believe it right away. It looks for an innocent explanation. Maybe there was a mix-up. Maybe it was a different Daniel Reyes. Maybe my mom had a good reason. I called her. "Hey, sweetie, can I call you back? I'm at the pharmacy. Mom, I need you to tell me about my transplant." Silence. 3 full seconds of silence over the phone, which doesn't sound like a lot until you've counted 3 seconds of your own mother deciding how much to lie to you.
What transplant? That was the moment I knew. Not from what she said, from what she didn't say. An innocent person says, "What are you talking about?" A guilty person clarifies the lie. She said, "What transplant?" Present tense, like it was an ongoing ambiguous thing, instead of, "You don't have a transplant." Small detail. It told me everything. "The hospital just called me, Mom. They told me everything. The donor match, the deposit, the cancellation 3 weeks ago. I need you to explain it to me right now." And that's when she said the sentence I will never ever forget as long as I live. "Daniel, you're being dramatic. You were stable. Priya's wedding had a deadline. Yours didn't." I want to pause the story here for a second because I think this is the part a lot of people watching get wrong when they imagine themselves in this situation. They imagine screaming, slamming doors, a dramatic confrontation at the dinner table with everyone crying. That's not what happened. And honestly, that's not what works. I hung up the phone and I did something my mother did not expect from me, because for 29 years I had been the calm one, the reasonable one, the one who didn't need to worry about that stuff. I got in my car and drove to St. Marcus Transplant Center that same morning. I sat down with Dr. Whitfield and the hospital's patient advocate, and I asked for every document tied to my case, every phone log, every cancellation form, every signature. Because here's something important. My mother had signed the cancellation authorization using a power of attorney form I did not remember signing. I did not remember it because I never signed it. 8 months earlier, during the chaos of my initial diagnosis, my parents had asked me to sign a stack of intake paperwork so they could help coordinate my care while I was at work. I signed it in about 90 seconds, trusting the people who raised me without reading every line, because who reads every line when your mother is standing next to you saying, "Just sign here, here, and here, I'll explain it later"? One of those pages was a limited medical power of attorney. It gave my mother legal authority to make certain care decisions on my behalf in circumstances where the patient is unavailable or has designated the representative for administrative coordination. She hadn't forged anything. That's the part that made it so much worse. She didn't need to forge anything. I had handed her the weapon myself in 90 seconds without reading it because I trusted her. The hospital's patient advocate looked at me and said something I'll never forget. "Legally, your mother didn't do anything unauthorized. Ethically, I don't have words for what this is." I sat with that for a moment. Legal, not illegal. That word did something strange to me. It made the betrayal feel almost worse somehow because there was no clean villain narrative here, no crime to point to, just a system that trusted family the way I had, and a mother who understood exactly how to use that trust as a tool. I asked her one question. "Can I revoke that authorization right now, today, in this office?" "Yes." "Then let's start there." We revoked the power of attorney on the spot. The advocate then asked me a question I wasn't prepared for. "Do you want us to notify your mother that the authorization has been revoked, or would you prefer she not know yet?" I thought about that for longer than I want to admit. Part of me wanted her to find out immediately, wanted her to feel even a fraction of the blindside I'd just felt. But the practical part of me, the part that had 11 days to save a donor match, knew better. If she found out I knew, she'd have time to build a defense, to call Priya, to get the family narrative locked into place before I had a chance to secure anything. "Don't notify her yet," I said. "I need time to work." That decision, staying quiet for 11 days while I fought to undo what she'd done, was the hardest part of this entire ordeal. Harder than the surgery itself. I sat across from my mother at a family lunch 4 days later, listening to her talk about seating charts for Priya's wedding, and I said nothing. I smiled. I passed the salt. And the entire time I had a folder in my car with her signature on a document that had nearly cost me my life. Revoking the power of attorney took 20 minutes. Getting the donor match back took 11 days of the hardest phone calls of my life. I called the donor coordination office directly, not through my parents, for the first time in this entire process, and explained everything. I learned the donor, a woman named Colleen who I'd never met, had been informed the recipient's family changed their mind and had been quietly heartbroken by it, because living donors don't do this lightly. She'd spent months preparing herself physically and emotionally to give a piece of her body to a stranger. When I called and explained what had actually happened, that I never changed my mind, that I never even knew, Colleen didn't hesitate for a second. "I'm still in," she said. "I never wanted to back out. Nobody told me you didn't know." That call broke something open in me that I hadn't let myself feel yet. A stranger had been more loyal to my life than my own mother. The medical team scrambled to resecure the surgical slot. The deposit, of course, was gone, spent on a wedding venue 3 states away. I didn't have $30,000 sitting around. But here's where the hospital's patient advocate turned out to be the actual hero of this story, not me. She flagged my case for the hospital's charity care fund and an emergency reinstatement review, specifically citing that the original cancellation was executed under what she called circumstances inconsistent with patient welfare. That phrase, written into an internal hospital document, became very important later. 9 days after that phone call, the surgery was back on the calendar. I did not tell my parents. I did not tell Priya. I told exactly one person, my brother Marcus, who flew in from Seattle without a single question asked and sat in my hospital waiting room for 6 hours while I got a piece of another human being's body sewn into mine. 3 weeks after the surgery, once I was cleared to travel and eat solid food and generally exist like a person again, I did something my mother genuinely did not see coming. I asked to host Sunday dinner at my apartment. My parents, Priya, Arjun, and Marcus, who flew back in specifically for this. My mother was thrilled. She thought this meant I'd gotten over it. Her words from a voicemail she left 2 weeks earlier that I never returned. She brought a dessert. Priya brought wedding photos from a cake tasting. I let everyone sit down. I let everyone eat for about 20 minutes. The kind of normal, warm, deceptively pleasant 20 minutes that makes what comes next hit so much harder. Then I put a folder on the table. Inside it, the hospital's cancellation record with my mother's signature. The bank transfer showing the $30,000 deposit landing in my parents' joint account on March 14th. The wedding venue's payment confirmation showing a $28,500 deposit from that same account on March 17th, 3 days later. And a letter from the hospital's patient advocate, the one that used the phrase circumstances inconsistent with patient welfare. Nobody said anything for a long time. My father was the first to speak. "Daniel, we were going to pay you back. We were going to explain everything after the wedding, when things calmed down." "Pay me back for what, Dad? A kidney? Do you understand what you're saying to me right now?" Priya started crying. Not, I noticed, out of guilt, out of fear that her wedding was about to become a scandal, which told me something too. She'd known. Maybe not every detail, but she'd known enough, and she'd stayed quiet, because a little party mattered more to her than her brother's life. My mother tried the same tactic that had worked on me for 29 years. "You're being dramatic. You're fine now. The surgery happened. Everything worked out." "It worked out," I said, "because a stranger named Colleen cared more about my life than you did. It worked out because a hospital administrator flagged your paperwork as unethical. It worked out despite you, not because of you." I'm not going to pretend this ended in some tidy Hollywood-style redemption arc, because it didn't. I filed a formal complaint with the hospital's ethics board, not for legal action against my parents, but to make sure that power of attorney loophole gets flagged in their intake process so it can't happen to another patient. The advocate told me 2 months later that the hospital changed its consent forms because of my case. That, to me, mattered more than any apology ever could. Priya's wedding happened 6 months later than planned, paid for by Arjun's family alone once word quietly got around about where the original deposit had actually come from. I wasn't there. I sent a card. I meant it. I don't wish her ill. I just don't trust the people standing next to her at that altar the way I used to. My father reached out once, about 4 months after that dinner, and said the one honest thing anyone in my family has said to me through this entire ordeal. I let it happen because I was scared of what not paying meant for our reputation. I chose reputation over you. I don't expect you to forgive that. I haven't. Not yet. Maybe someday. My mother has not apologized. She has, on 3 separate occasions, told mutual family members that I overreacted and humiliated the family by bringing paperwork to a dinner, as if the paperwork was the betrayal and not the 11 days I spent racing a clock she started without telling me.
Here's what I want you to take from this, if you've made it this far. I trusted my family with something as basic as a signature, because that's what you're supposed to be able to do with the people who raised you. And it wasn't a stranger who protected me in the end. It wasn't even really me. I was just the guy fighting a clock. It was a hospital administrator who noticed something wrong in a file. It was a donor named Colleen who never even met me, and chose to keep a promise my own mother broke. If there's one thing this whole nightmare taught me, it's this. Read every page before you sign it, even when it's family standing next to you saying, "Just sign here, I'll explain later." Especially then. I'm alive because a stranger kept a promise my parents didn't think was worth keeping. If this story hit you the way I think it did, tell me in the comments. Would you have brought the folder to dinner or handled it differently? And if you want to hear what happened when I ran into Colleen in person for the first time after the surgery, that story is coming next week. Subscribe so you don't miss it.